Got him. Oh man, that's a good one. Oh, yes. That is such a big smallmouth. Oh my goodness. If that's not 5, it's a heavy 4. It's such a big smallmouth, man. And he was hooked perfectly, man. That 3-inch shaker is just such a deadly bait. Killer technique. Big smallmouth. Cold water, man. It doesn't get any better. Look at the size of that thing, man. That's just awesome. What a tank, man. I mean, that fish is a tank. See ya. Okay, before we go any further in this video, I'm gonna go over a technique that has won me some money. It's something I've been using for a few years now, pretty much since I started fishing with Garmin electronics. It's called the Freestyle Technique. I'm gonna kind of go in depth in this video. I'm gonna do a little electronic settings, how I set up my Garmin Livescope Panoptix. I'm gonna talk about the tackle that I use and the technique itself. And there's gonna be more videos on this, but I'm gonna kind of simplify this into a cold water video. This technique has won me 100,000 this year. I used it on Lake Lanier in Georgia. I weighed every single one of my fish on day 1 with this technique, and basically what it consists of is it's a finesse technique, light line, and a small little bait. We actually made a special jig from Do It Molds with this. It's called the Freestyle Jig. This is a 3-inch Rains bubbling shaker. It's a light wire hook. It's a small little profile bait, and when you're dealing with cold water, tough conditions, suspended fish, this is my go-to technique. This is something I've been working with the Garmin Panoptix. It's something goes hand in hand. You know, with Panoptix, I can see fish 40, 50 feet away from the boat. I can throw this bait to those fish and I can catch them. Fish that are suspended, they may be 20 foot off the bottom. So it's something that works on suspended fish. It also works on fish that are tight to the bottom. And it's a technique that I've just refined over the last 4 years. And I'm gonna go into my whole setup at the end of this video, and I'm also going to do a part in this video that shows how I set up my Livescope Panoptix, what I like for open water fishing. There he is. Came up, turned, went down. There's another one with him. Coming up. Oh boy, here we go. There's a lot of activity down there right now, so you got to be patient. I'm keeping this bait in one spot, just shaking it there. Sometimes these fish are reluctant, because of, you know, the lake I'm fishing on has a lot of pressure. So you'll see fish actually just kind of come up to the bait a little bit, go away, but eventually I'm just going to keep this bait here, shake it in place, and eventually one's going to come up and eat it. And I just want to keep it above the fish. I got one on the bottom now. Looks like he's slowly making his way over here. I don't know if he sees it yet or not, but we'll find out in a minute. There he is coming up. That's a big one too. Got him. That is a big one. Over 5. That's a monster smallmouth. That is an absolute monster. Look how he ate that thing too. That fish is a 5+. Huge frame. Little bait. Man, that bubbling shaker's killer. Monster, man. What a beauty. What a big, big smallmouth, man. I mean, look at the size of that fish. We'll let her go quick. What an awesome fish, man. Got him. Look, and there's a fish chasing him up. Several fish chasing him up. Look at him. Wow. Big smallie. There's several fish down there. Giant fish. Got him. Nice one, man. Barely hooked. That's the importance of having that light action rod. Another solid fish, man. What a big, big frame smallmouth. I mean, that thing is fat. Just totally awesome. That fish came out of nowhere. That was really cool, and I think it's a better fish too. Make sure my drag is a little loose. And now there's several of them down there. The fish came out of nowhere. That was unbelievable. Big fish too. This is 5-pound Gamma Touch fluorocarbon, so you got to take your time. There we go. Barely hooked. Definitely not hooked the way that they normally are. So you just play them out. You can see that rod does the work. It's a light action spinning rod, Fury 661. Perfect for this technique. Got a little hook on there. And that fish is still fighting pretty good for this cold water. What a chunk. Got him. And that is normally not where they're hooked. They're hooked right in the corner of the mouth there. A little 3-inch bubbling shaker. And a nice bronze back, man. That's a beautiful fish. We're gonna let this fish go down quick because that fish got caught out of deep water. Got one coming up. There he is. And that fish was outside the cone too. I was just trying to adjust my cone angle and I seen him come in, and that's a good fish too. Man, they're still full of so much energy this time of year. It's amazing. Our water temperature is 41 degrees. And this is just such a deadly technique. Anytime these fish are in a situation where you have dying bait fish, and when the water gets cold, this is something that happens every year. And these fish can get kind of lethargic. And so if you can kind of mimic what's going on, boy, oh boy, let me tell you something, you can just clean up on these fish. And this is another big smallmouth. I mean, just a beautiful fish right there. I'm just gonna take my time. The whole deal is you're using light line, which never hurts to get more bites, but the whole deal with using the light line is obviously just you're using a light jig head. So the light line is key to be able to work that bait, to get it down there, you know, fast. We're fishing 35 foot of water, and 5-pound line, 1/8 ounce jig head, and big smallmouth. And that is just, man, I tell you, it's probably one of my favorite techniques that there is just fishing this little bait in cold water. And it's something that works year round too. I mean, it's not just a cold water bait, but it cleans up in cold water. It's really, really neat. Awesome bait for suspended fish in the summertime, and a deadly cold water ice fishing bait. And I've caught so many different species on this, not just for smallmouth, but man, the smallmouth love it. There we go. And that's hooked where he should be. Little light wire jig, 3-inch bubbling shaker, and a nice smallmouth. Here we go. Big one coming up. Big one coming up. Got him. Oh man, that's a big one. Oh. Get away from that trolling motor. Boy, oh boy, that was an awesome mark. There's more down there too. What a football, man. That's a big smallmouth. Hooked perfectly. Man. It's 4.5 easy. What a fish, man. We're gonna let that fish go away from this area here. And just slide over with the trolling motor and let him go to a different location so we don't spook those other fish. We'll get them down real fast. You can definitely spook a school sometimes if you let them go right back into them, but you should get them down because that fish's air bladder will inflate, and if you leave them in a live well, you may have to fizz them. So you don't want to harm the fish. Let them go quick and they'll be fine. Here we go. Big one. Got him. Got him. Small one compared to those other ones. When you call a 3-pounder small. Yep, good fish, but just a 3-pounder. When you're calling these small, it's a pretty good day. So big one. Got him. Got him. And that fish was so tight to the bottom. Quick release. He was so tight to the bottom that you could barely see him. I mean, he just came out of nowhere. He was hanging right by a stump, and that was just amazing to be able to see that on the Livescope. Unreal. Got him. Below average size, but a nice fish nonetheless. Still a nice fish. When you're complaining about catching fish this size, that's a good problem to have. And that is so cool to see them on that Livescope, man. I mean, it is awesome. This Freestyle Technique is very versatile. It's not just a deep, cold water, on the bottom type of technique. I use it for suspended fish. I use it in the summertime. It definitely does work in cold water. It's one of the best ways actually I know of to catch fish in cold water. It's replaced the drop shot for me in a lot of situations, and the reason for that is a lot of times what I'll do is if I mark a fish and he's on the bottom even, I'll keep that bait above the fish, and that fish is going to come up to the bait, and sometimes you got to pull them off the bottom. You know, with the drop shot, you can't really do that. It kind of messes up the action. It just doesn't, it's not as good as taking a little bait like this, shaking it, and that's what I'm doing. I'm constantly shaking that bait, and if that fish comes up to the bait, I may have to pull them off the bottom a little bit more, so I can control the depth you know, with this bait, and it still looks natural the whole way. That's the key. When I'm fishing for suspended fish, if I see one out on my Panoptix 50 foot away, I can throw that bait out there, I can watch it fall, kind of lead it into that fish, and I'm going to keep it above that fish as well, and I'm going to constantly shake it, and I may pull that fish up higher in the water column as well. That's why I call it the Freestyle Technique, because you can use it at any depth of the water, and it's not just for open water too. You know, a lot of times I've used that lighter head, that 3/32 or the 1/8 ounce along a weed line with this little bait, you know, and you just cast it along the outside edge of the weed line and just kind of let it slowly pendulum back to the boat while you're shaking it, and you can catch suspended fish off a weed line with it. So there's a lot of different situations for it, but in this video I was catching fish on the bottom. They were lethargic, they didn't want to chase a bait. You couldn't catch them really on a swim bait or a blade bait. You had to drop this right on them and just work these fish, similar to how you do ice fishing. So, and it's actually how this whole technique has evolved. It's from ice fishing. I caught a lot of big fish through the ice with it, and I've transitioned it to open water fishing, and then I realized how good it was on suspended fish. But those fish in the past were impossible to catch without the Panoptix because you wouldn't be able to see them. Now you can see them, you can throw your bait out there. It's just an incredible technique. It's whenever I am dealing with suspended fish, I always have this tied on, and most of the time I'm using a 3-inch, but sometimes I'll go up to a 3.5 inch size depending on what the bait fish is, but 3.5 inch is perfect for this technique. And as I said earlier, you know, it's a Do It Mold freestyle jig. It's that small little Mustad 32 746 hook with that 3-inch shaker. Don't really use anything over 3/16 ounce with the 3-inch. Now with 3.5 inch, I'll go, you know, up to even, you know, 7/16 or a 1/2 ounce sometimes if I'm fishing real deep water. And the thing is, you want to use the lightest jig head you can get away with. The lighter the jig head, the better the action. So a lot of times when I'm using this 3-inch shaker, you know, I'm using an 1/8 ounce, 3/32 ounce, and I'm using light line. So light line, you have to use a light setup. My setup for this, and there's a few different rods that I use, but in this video, and this is a rod I really like, I used a Dobbins 661 Fury, 6'6", 1 power, a Lew's Custom Pro Speed Spin in the 1000 size, and 5-pound Gamma Touch fluorocarbon. Most of the time when I'm fishing this small little 3-inch shaker, it's 5-pound touch fluorocarbon. It's not a thing where I use the line for getting more bites. It's just when you're dealing with a lighter head, especially like a 3/32 ounce or so, or even lighter than that, that thin diameter line allows you to fish a lighter bait in deeper water. And what a lighter bait does is, if you have a 3/16 ounce and you cast it out and you got a suspended fish and you're trying to work that fish, well, a 3/16 will pendulum back to the boat faster than, say, like a 3/32. So the lighter the jig head, the more it's kind of float and stay in the strike zone, kind of stay in that water column a little bit slower, and it's not going to pendulum to the boat as fast as something a little bit heavier. So you need light line when you're dealing with a light head, especially when you're fishing 30, some odd foot of water. You need that thin diameter so it allows you to work that bait, and that's why you need a light setup. This rod is perfect. It's got the right amount of backbone for the hook set, but it's a very soft tip, and you need a good drag. The important deal when you're using light line like this is having a good drag, and this Custom Pro Speed Spin is an awesome reel for that. So that's my setup. I'm going to go into the settings on my Garmin units on how I like to set up my Livescope Panoptix. Okay, so this boat's out of the water right now, so the Livescope isn't in the water. It's not working, but I'm going to show you the setup that I like using, color palette, settings, so on and so forth. So I'm in my Livescope menu, the screen. I'm going to go to menu. The gain is going to be manually set to the depth of the water that you're fishing. So the shallower the water, the less gain. Gain is your sensitivity. The deeper the water, the more gain. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess with that gain. I'm going to turn it up. A lot of times the more you turn it up, the more noise you're going to get. I'm going to turn it up to where I have, just on that verge of getting some noise, and that's going to give me the most sensitivity in each depth. So less gain in shallower water, more gain in deeper water. The deeper water you fish, the more gain you need. So that's one thing. The other thing is sometimes I will keep the depth range on auto, sometimes I'll manually set it. And the reason I would manually set it is to get more screen. So if I'm on auto, it would be on a lot of depth change. I'll keep it on auto so it'll automatically adjust. But if I'm in a consistent depth, a lot of times I'm going to manually set my depth range so I get the most screen. The cool thing about Livescope is if you have like a fish, you could zoom in and zoom out now with the new feature that they did in the software upgrade. So that's a really cool feature that was available now, and it wasn't available when I shot that video, which was last fall. So that's a cool thing they've added. Garmin keeps doing better and better things to this Livescope, and it's awesome. So the other thing that I like to do is I will set my forward range a lot of times when I'm in a forward motion and I'm looking forward. A lot of times when I'm fishing, when fish are on the bottom, I'm going to change it to live view down. But when I'm dealing with suspended fish, I'm going to have it on the forward. A lot of times I keep it about 70 foot, 60 to 70 foot. That's a good long cast. I want to try to keep my bait, I want to get within that suspended fish within 30 to 50 foot and keep my bait a nice short cast. You get better accuracy that way. When I'm in the live view down setting, a lot of times it's a little bit different. But when going back into settings, there's a couple of things that you want to set. Your noise reject to medium, your TVG to medium. And the most important thing I feel for open water is your appearance. You want it on yellow. What that does, it gives you a white background. I feel like you get the best contrast. You can see your bait the best. You can see your fish the best. So these are a couple simple settings. There's more stuff, and I'll be posting more videos with stuff like this in the future. Okay, so in this video, the fish that were caught were on an 1/8 ounce freestyle jig, and this is the color here in the 3-inch bubbling shaker. That's the actual bait. That's the color, just a kind of a natural type color. If you guys want to make your own, this is the mold that you need. The Do It Freestyle Jig Mold. There's two different molds. They have one that is 1/32 all the way up to 3/16. This is what I use mostly for this worm. I mean, I don't go any heavier than 3/16. When I won Lanier, I was using a 3/16, but I was fishing 45 foot of water. When I'm fishing, 30 foot and less, most of the time I'm doing an 1/8 ounce or a 3/32. And this video was an 1/8 ounce, that color, 3-inch bubbling shaker, and that's the mold you need. The hook that you want is a Mustad 32 746 and a size 2.